Welcome back to Roots and Refuge Farm. We are going to the garden where we are going to have a pretty heavy conversation while we pick tomatoes. I got distracted. There's ripe fruit over here. So this is how tomato plants grow when we leave them alone. Most of this fruit has really bad sun scald. Some of these tomatoes are huge, but they're so damaged because they've been laying on the ground. That looks like Dr. Witchy's. I don't think I'm gonna get to harvest any of this. This is why we stake our tomatoes. This is what would happen if nature had its way. There's lessons there. All right, so we need to talk about death. This is going to be a pretty heavy topic. I'm gonna talk about some pretty hard things. And I'm going to talk to you about them the way I think about them. And I have been homesteading for 10 years, which means the way I think about them may be different than the way you think about them if you have not had to deal with the reality of this life. So it's really hard when you have to talk about death and there's a filter in place where people are perceiving what you're saying through the lens of how you would handle like a beloved cat or a companion pet, and it's different. But nonetheless, we still need to talk about it. All right, let's pop in the greenhouse, grab a couple of baskets. Ooh, there's spider webs everywhere. Wow, look at that coxcomb. It's like fluorescent. I don't know how well that's gonna convey. The cottage garden I've just completely stopped trying to do anything with. It's just wild. It is what it is. But I think that in its wildness it's lovely. However, there is asparagus growing everywhere. Random basil volunteer in the walkway. I do not like all the things that are popping up in my walkways. There's a lot of weeds that I need to deal with, but I can be happy about this one. I'm on a mission to go through this garden and get all the ripe cherry tomatoes and some okra that I just want to eat. It was really hot today, very hot. I came out here for a little bit, but I honestly couldn't handle it. I had to tap. It's now 8 o'clock in the evening and it's still 90 degrees, which is 32 Celsius. But there is a chance of rain on the forecast tomorrow, and I need to get all these tomatoes that are ripe off the vine, because if it's been very hot and dry and then it rains, they'll split. I was talking with Maya this week about the content that I had planned out. Just a little insight into the way my mind works. I live by lists because I have ADHD, and so I have a really hard time staying on focus on task without like some sort of structure in place. So I have lists. My phone is full of lists. My little note section is all the things that I don't want to forget. Like what's open here is a link to a crochet tutorial on YouTube, because I'll see it and I'll think I want to make that, but if I do not make some physical reminder of it, I will never think of it again in my life. But anyway, I typically start the week with a general idea of the content I want to make that week, and it's like, you know, the eggplants are coming in, I should make a baba ganoush recipe video or things like that. This week, there were several things that we needed to address. I did a devotional video earlier in the week. You may have seen that. That was, I mean, it's relatively heavy. I mean, it's just to sit down and like heart-to-heart chat. And Maya and I are filming tomorrow a video talking about the fact that we're not building our house right now. That's coming. We're going to go into great depth on that, about kind of what's happened, the decision that's made, and the pivot and all of that. It's a little heavy. I mean, it's okay. It's okay, but it's a little heavy. And then we've dealt with some really, we just dealt with some hard stuff this week. And because we live our life out loud, I share these things with you guys. I think that there's value to them, but gosh, it's hard sometimes whenever I look at an entire week of sharing and I'm like, none of this is fun. So let me start by telling you as I pick these tomatoes, because in my mind this alleviates this. This is hard. Like the hardest, this is hard to deal with anyway. Like whenever you're having to deal with like just hard stuff on the farm, like where there's livestock, there's dead stock, and dealing with death is just hard anyway. But then when you have to tell people about it, it's harder. So I'm going to pick these tomatoes because it makes me feel better. Like, maybe it makes you feel better. I don't know, but it does make me feel better. I'm going to tell you 3 events that happened within the last week and a half. I came home from my trip to Idaho and Iowa, and my tiny goat had died. The one that I had just gotten from my friend Amanda. I was so excited about him. Twister was so beautiful. He's the son of Mayhem, which was my favorite goat that I had. And I hate that it happened while I was gone because I don't know. Like, now Wes and Will keep the farm when we travel. And like, Will follows instructions great. He takes care of the animals here. He doesn't have a ton of experience with it. He's great in the garden. He primarily does the garden. He milks the goats for me because he likes it. Wes, though, has a lot of experience with animals, more than us even. And so I feel pretty confident that had there been anything that could happen for that goat to save him, it would have happened. I don't know what happened, though. And that it's hard because I don't know what happened. And you know, there's that big what if of like, had I been here, could I have saved him? Could I have done something? Would I have noticed sooner? You know, like, and I don't know. I mean, like, we can all play the what if game, but we usually don't win when we do. So that was blow 1. I was really bummed. I can't say that I was like thrown into any state of grief or anything like that. I had not made any sort of emotional connection with that goat. Of all the goats on the farm, that was the one that I was the least connected with because we just got him. And when you keep animals, there is kind of like an echelon of connection with them. And there is sometimes grief involved when they die. Sometimes it's not as bad as others. I mean, if I'm just being completely frank, I don't want to pretend about a sadness that didn't exist because I want to be completely honest with you. More than anything, I was disappointed. I felt like, man, I'd had such high hopes. It was going to be so cool. He was so beautiful. He came from Mayhem. I felt really bad that Amanda had made that whole trip down here. And then, you know, like, it felt like it was for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. I got to spend the day with my good friend, and it was beautiful and wonderful. And so, you know, I had to process some disappointment. I had to really go through a lot of the what if, but for the most part, that wasn't nearly the worst farm blow I've ever taken. Right after, you know, we got home, Twister had died. I was sad. And then, I told you guys, this is so hard. Hope came down with a really bad case of mastitis. So Hope was our first dairy cow. When we moved to Batesburg, South Carolina, I met a new friend who had been a viewer of my channel, and she had a cow for sale. Her name's Hannah, and I chose to purchase Hope because she came with a built-in mentor. And Hannah has become a great friend. She's taught me a lot. She's also just been a dang breath of fresh air. She doesn't have a look at social media, and I love getting to just go sit with her and just be with somebody who's just doing homesteading and farming purely from the love of the thing and the conviction of it. But I bought Hope from her, and Hope taught me how to have a dairy cow. She was a jerk. Don't get me wrong. She was a jerk. And, oh my gosh, I have a lot of memories of Hope that are not great. Like, she's a butthead. But she taught me how to have a dairy cow. She was a great first dairy cow. Great to hand milk. You know, we got her maybe a touch hastily, milked her out in the field for months with no cover. I mean, sitting out in the rain milking. She kicked me more times than I ever cared to get kicked by a cow. She was good, though. Had lovely long teats, and she knew what she wanted. Now, for a little while now, Hope and her fate has been up for discussion. We'll just say that. We had a really hard time getting her rebred, and in that, like, we paid for AI, it didn't take, which is not terribly unusual. Then we put her out in the pasture with a bull, and she was there for a long time, and she just kept going back into heat. And we called the vet back out. She's had 2 rounds of pneumonia that have had to be treated. And I mean, she wasn't like a sickly cow or anything, but I think that a lot of times with animals, and I think this is probably true of people too, that when you start down the road of like medical interventions and you have issues that have to be dealt with, maybe they create more issues down the line. I don't know. She's had pneumonia twice, but my thing is like, she had it the once, so maybe she was prone to having it again. You know, it creates scar tissue in their lungs, but she had to be treated for that. She had mastitis the first lactation that she had here, and we treated that. We try to do things as organically as possible. We use a product from a company called Synergy. We don't have any affiliation to them, and it typically knocks it out. Like, we've had like brushes with mastitis with like our cows and goats, but the only full-blown mastitis we had was with Hope, and we had treated it and recovered her, but that quarter did not produce well again that entire lactation. But the real issue was that we had a really hard time getting her rebred. We ended up having to pay for 2 vet visits to get her treated. She was having cysts on her cervix or something like that. And we had kind of had discussion when she wasn't getting bred, when she kept coming back into heat, where we said, you know, at some point we have to call this. Like, for responsible stewardship, at some point, if this cow is not functioning the way we need our animals to function, we're gonna have to say we can't keep her anymore. And in good conscience, I don't feel like offloading this problem animal to somebody else. She needs to be culled and put in the freezer. And that's hard. That's hard whenever you've spent that time. The milking relationship with an animal it's different than anything else I've ever experienced. And I'm verbally processing here in the hopes that maybe it will help somebody. I am a bleeding heart when it comes to animals. Like, my first job was when I was 12. I began volunteering at the animal shelter. I literally spent every single day after school for years going to the animal shelter and mucking out pens and taking dogs on walks. And then even as an adult, as recently as the last handful of years, when I still lived in Arkansas and had connections with that animal center, that animal shelter, I would go in and take photos of the dogs to be able to get them adopted. Like, I love animals. I love their company. I think that they are worthy of our honor. And learning to make farm decisions as far as stewardship, as far as, hey, is this worth the strain on our pasture? Hey, is this worth us continuing to sink our resources into? That's been a very hard lesson for me, because it's kind of gone against a lot of what I felt about animals. I feel like I think I talk about my experience in animal shelters. Like, I was a vegan for a long time. Like, I have definitely been, like, very much, like, the love of animals. But homesteading has kind of challenged some of my mindsets and how I view them, and also let me see that it's not always so black and white. Aren't these beautiful? They're kind of saladette size. They're hard to tell when they're done. You have to squeeze them. So we'd had this conversation when Hope wasn't getting rebred. Jeremiah had basically sat me down. I guess he was anticipating me being difficult because I had a sentimental attachment. But I was like, no, you're right. If she's not getting rebred, we can cull her, which culling is butchering or killing animals in your flock or your herd that are not working towards your program. When you find like genetic disorders in animals, a lot of times the best thing to do is cull it, because you don't need to perpetuate that issue into future generations. Well, Hope did end up getting pregnant. And so we basically had set a time where we were like, okay, in 6 months, which we were pretty liberal, we didn't want to cull her. So we said in 6 months we'll preg test her, and if she's not pregnant, we'll put her in the freezer. Well, in 6 months she was obviously pregnant. We didn't have to preg test her. She was like bagging up. And she ended up giving birth to a bull calf, Socks. I shared it here. And she immediately fell ill with milk fever. So I like to be very honest with myself about what's going on with my animals, because I want to grow. I want to grow in stewardship. So if I've got like something that's chronically happening, or if I've got an issue that's coming up, the first place I always look is my management. Is my management the problem? When we lived in Arkansas, we had a whole bunch of goats on a small area, and we honestly dealt with a lot of issues that we've never dealt with after we moved. And in retrospect, it was an us issue. So I'm looking at Hope getting milk fever, and I'm like, okay, I feel like our practices are pretty good as far as avoiding milk fever, and this is the first time we'd ever dealt with it. But again, I did research. We figured out where to learn. We called the vet out. It cost $400 to have the vet come out. We treated Hope. She got better. But since then, we've had a lot of issues. Since she has had pneumonia multiple times, she has been really struggling with the heat. Like, I'm talking, she's constantly over in the corner, staying in the shade, foaming at the mouth, drooling, tongue out. And other cows aren't like that. She's just really, really struggling with the heat. And I think because she's been struggling with the heat, because of the damage that she has from pneumonias, she it's just not been producing much. She's been calf sharing. We've been getting about 1 gallon from her in the morning, and that's it. That's very low. For reference, Freya gives us between 3 and 4 gallons in the morning, and then feeds her calf throughout the rest of the day. We're like hanging in there, and we started talking about it after the bad milk fever, and we kind of had thought, we'd sort of put it out there like, hey, maybe we shouldn't rebreed Hope. Maybe we should go ahead and just make the decision to butcher her and process her, put her in the freezer. And especially she continued to struggle with the heat. We were kind of like leaning into that, but we don't make that decision hasty. I mean, that to me is such a big decision. We got home from our trip, and Hope was dealing with mastitis. And the way that we treat mastitis is with these organic products. There are different ways to treat mastitis. You can, like what we do is we use those creams and stuff, we apply them, and then we milk an extra time every day. So we'll milk 3 times a day and then apply those creams every single time. And honestly, that usually knocks it out. We put her calf in with her more to try to get, to make sure she was getting emptied out and make sure that it was clearing any infection out. Which is fine, but then we also have to step back and think, okay, we're feeding this cow and it costs about $7 a day to feed her, and we're definitely not getting enough milk to warrant that. But it's like, okay, maybe we can get her over this hump. Maybe we can get to the point where it makes sense again. Well, after about a week, it became apparent that it wasn't getting a whole lot better. It didn't feel like she didn't have like an overall fever. It was contained to the udder. And Maya came in one morning, and he basically was like, I guess I'm going to call the vet out, and we're going to run her through a round of antibiotics. And for my first time ever, I'm never the one that makes the hard decisions. I've always put that on Maya. But the first time ever, I said, I think we need to assess that, because I don't know that that's the right thing to do. Because we had already decided that we were going to cull Hope after this lactation. And I did not want to pump her through a bunch of antibiotics, especially when she was already struggling so bad with the heat. And I've been just kind of keeping a really close eye on her, because I don't know if she's going to flare up with pneumonia again with how bad she's been struggling. I also just can't justify spending another $400 on the vet to keep this cow alive for a handful more months before we process her. There have been too many issues. And I made the decision that the best thing for us to do in our stewardship and for our farm and even for Hope was to go ahead and process her. See, this is why I wanted to harvest tomatoes while I talked, because I knew I would get to the hard parts and I would have a basket full of lovely tomatoes. Oh, look what I pulled off the vines earlier today. Kajari melons. I haven't cut them open yet. I figured I'd share them with the kids. this made me really excited. That was an incredibly hard decision to make. It's the first time I've made a decision probably that hard. Now, we had a hog that last year we processed, Dolly, which she was going to be a breeder. She was an old spot hog we got from our friends the road. She was so sweet. She let us scratch on her. And when we bred her, she developed a lot of hernias in her belly. And we called the vet out and paid the hundreds of dollars. And they basically said that our option was to put her through like I think it was like a $3,000 operation, and that she could never be bred after that. And that's not why we had her. So we had to make the decision to go ahead and process her. That one hit really hard. I think that with Hope, I had kind of already begun wrapping my head around the fact that she wasn't going to be with us. Seeing her struggle the way that she's been struggling kind of eased the blow, but it was still really hard. That was a heavy decision to make. Part of homesteading is making decisions like this. This is not a petting zoo. These are not all my pets. We have like a very real awareness of like the echelon of emotional value of all of our animals. I mean, I'd probably like sell my car to save Bear, you know? Like, I mean, he's my companion, my pet. He's my best buddy. He's always watching. But when it comes to like dairy animals, at this point, Hope has she's cost more in vet bills than every other animal I have put together. And she's worked out for us. I'm so thankful I got her. I'm so thankful. Hannah's taught me so much. Hope has taught me so much. But at this point, it is the best decision to say. So instead of calling the vet, Maya called the processor. We did not have any time in this summer to be able to butcher Hope ourselves. We really don't have the setup. We've done some hogs here, but we've not done any cows. And we actually have a schedule with our steers worked out over the next 2 years of like processing our steers that we have. And so we really don't need her a lot. And she's older. I mean, I don't know how high quality the meat's going to be. We'll see. I think it'll be good enough. I mean, it'll be good enough to eat, but I didn't want to put her through another round of antibiotics so soon. We were staying on top of the infection and keeping it like down, but we weren't knocking it entirely. And I think it was just that her immune system was just struggling because of heat. I don't know. But Hope went yesterday. And this is the hard part. This is the not romantic part. But every single time we belly up at the table, the truth is that something dies for us to live. And you feel it a little more acutely whenever you know its name. So, the last event of the last week, this is dang heavy, probably somewhat triggering. A tornado went through Bossier City, Louisiana as an offshoot of Hurricane Beryl. My cousin Chaz and his fiance and their children decided to go over to her grandma's house and go in her grandma's house to try to seek some more secure shelter. And a massive tree fell on the house. And Kaylin, who is Chaz's fiance and the mother of his babies, she did not live. So, if you've been here with us for long, I mean, from the way back, we had a very life-altering encounter with a tornado that took young lives too soon, many years ago. And so, naturally, that story broke my heart for my cousin Chaz. Now, I want to be crystal clear, like, I come from a huge family. My parents are both from 6 siblings, and I have cousins that I don't know super well. And I mean, I haven't seen Chaz in years. Now, his mom, Anna, and I grew up together very close. Anna is my first cousin. Chaz is my second cousin. So, I don't feel like I need anybody to say I'm sorry for your loss. There's no void in my life. But, even still, the grief is real. And I remember how a tornado can change everything. And my heart just breaks for all of them who are feeling acutely the loss of Kaylin. I feel like this is one of those things that I know this is going to like cause some people to just have sobs come up from their guts to say, but I feel like to honor her, it should be said, she died shielding her children. So that's a lot to process in a week. And it's why I said we need to talk about death. Now I've been doing these like public speaking engagements for the last, I don't know, a few years. And I give some variation of the same general talk wherever I go. I mean, like, I feel like it is the great value that I have to offer. When I'm asked to teach, I will, you know, about succession sewing and gardening. But if somebody asks me to spill my heart out, the thing I'm going to talk about is the mindsets that I've learned from homesteading and the things that I have carried with me that have, like, changed me integrally. And one thing that I have taken from homesteading that has completely changed the way I'm living my life is how we view death. My tomatoes are loving the shade cloth. Look at that loveliness. Now, there's tragedy. Kaylin dying so young is such a tragedy. And there is tragedy. I mean, and I don't have the answers. I don't have the explanation. When Jeremiah's mom died at 60, I mean, that was tragic. And it was my first real time of experiencing, like, a void. I don't know how long it took me to stop thinking when I ran out of something, oh, let me just go see if Jana has it next door. Longer than I would like to admit. But what happens on a farm, though sometimes it can be tragic, a lot of it is very normal. You know, a fragile baby goat that just didn't bounce back from transport. I don't know what happened. It's not tragic. It's sad. It's disappointing. But it's not the same as tragedy. The thing with hope, I mean, that was a heavy decision. It was weighty. But it was stewardship. Like, it was the right thing to do. I do actually believe that. That when I look at the money that I could have kept pumping into that cow to just make her continue living even though she wasn't thriving, I don't think that it would have been good stewardship for me to continue to do that. I think that I would have been making that decision to protect myself from pain, to feel good about the things that I was doing. When I look at a tornado taking a mama from her babies, I got nothing. Hey y'all, I'm sorry for the very abrupt change of scenery here. I couldn't finish this video the other day. I couldn't do it. We actually had a trip to the lake planned, our like summer camping trip, and we're wrapping up now. We've been here for days. We camp very close to our house, so we can go home throughout the week. So I'd shot the first half of this video, the very beginning of us coming here, right before I left to come over. Anyway, after the last handful of days of rest and relaxation and unplugging, I'm feeling in a much better place. So the point that I really wanted to like bring home with this video and sharing these events is, one, of course, I mean, please pray for my family and all the ones who are dealing with loss of loved ones. And two, I mean, the thing that I really love to talk about when I talk about our mindsets of death is that some of the things that we deal with on the farm are normal. And I think that we don't always know how to deal with that because our culture doesn't teach us to treat death like it's normal. It used to be, you know, when people used to live more multi-generationally, when people lived in closer community, when you didn't send your old people away to old people homes or your sick people away to different places they were cared for in the home, you know, like, and I mean, obviously that still happens, but culturally, like, there are some norms that have really disconnected us from the cycle of life. And unfortunately, I think that it just takes away people's power when it comes to growing food and raising food. From the seat that I occupy, hearing from people in so many, you know, stages of homesteading. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who are just getting started, and a lot of people go through their first, like, homestead loss. And some of them are very traumatic, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's it can be very traumatic to be the person who's dealing with a life or death situation and feel the weight of that on yourself. And I mean, you see some gruesome stuff. I mean, it can be really hard. I'm not downplaying the hardness of managing things on a farm. But a lot of people give up because they just can't cope with the way that it feels. And the bottom line is this: whether it's the tragedy of human loss, whether it's a traumatic situation on the farm, whether it's just a run-of-the-mill cycle of life thing, you gotta feel it. Like, you have to make space to feel it. And not by trying to make it go away, not by diminishing it. That's kind of the thing. Like, I want to be really honest with myself. Like, what do I feel about this? I don't want to feel the pressure to pretend to be, like, absolutely devastated over something that I'm more disappointed about. I don't want to minimize the weight of a decision. I don't want to make decisions selfishly to avoid pain myself. And then when there is real, genuine, like, grief involved, I want to process it. You have to process grief. When Maya's mom passed away, I had a friend named GT. He's actually since also died. And he was an older man, and he came up to me. I was standing next to Jana's casket, and he came up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder. And he was such a precious man. He's so wise. Always disheveled. His gray hair was always just crazy. He was so precious. And he came up to me and he said, "Jessica, grieve well." And I had no idea what he meant because I'd never done it before. But, like, the process of grieving, whether it's for a person that you loved, whether it's for an animal that you cared for and that provided for you, that fed you, no matter what it is, grief is an expression of love, and it is a joy in our human experience to get to feel grief. It's hard, but there's a depth to it, and it's so human. You know, and I talk a lot about embracing our humanity, and I think that the mindset of death and wrapping our head around it is just a necessary part of this. Obviously, it's now been almost 2 weeks since all of this stuff happened, but it's a lot to process. I mean, it's been a lot to process. I've cried a lot. I spent about 3 days in bed doing much of nothing. You know, I got up to milk and feed the kids and stuff, but I played an obscene amount of Candy Crush on my phone and read a stupid book that didn't require any thought or feeling. And I just cried. And I'll still have to process some grief. These are not light things. I did need to share them with y'all, honestly. And maybe there's not some great lesson to glean out of it right now, and that's fine. You know, like, living in a glass house doesn't mean necessarily you always have to translate things for people, but I will share it with you, honestly. So all of this went on, and we've enjoyed our lake trip. It was needed. Sometimes it's needed to just take some time off and connect with your kids and just, you know, make space. So that is all. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today and all the days you do. God bless you. Until next time.